At 9 o'clock this morning it was a bit iffy and it was raining, but actually it looks like we're in for a beautiful afternoon. So we all know how much this means to everyone, and today is a very special day because it's 3 years ago that the first heart was painted on this wall. Sadly, since then a further 85,000 people have died from COVID from that very day 3 years ago, and we're here today to remember them. And what we're going to do together is we're going to wait for the chimes of Big Ben at 2 o'clock, and as soon as that's finished we're going to start our walk of memories, and that will involve stopping at every panel. One of the team of volunteers will read a poem, one of the children volunteers will lay some flowers, and then we're going to take a minute to just stand together in silence at each panel, thinking of the thousands of people who are represented by the hearts on that panel and the people whose faces you can see on the photographs above. And for anyone who's not aware, the photographs that are along the length of this wall represent just 1% of the number of people who've died in the UK from COVID since the pandemic began, and it continues, as we all know. So I'm going to stop talking for a moment. We'll wait for the chimes of Big Ben, and then we're going to do 25 minutes of silence, walking from one panel to another. We're going to try and keep to time, because what we want to do is when we get to the far end of the wall and we've finished, we're going to go back and collect carnations, and then after the clock has chimed 3 o'clock, we'll be casting the carnations into the river in memory of the person that you've lost. So I'm going to stop talking, and hopefully the clock will chime the hour very shortly. We are at panel 25. To whom shall fall the oppressive honour of eulogising the tens of thousands who have been carried off by the plague? What words can bring solace to the bereaved when fresh graves are being dug? In the absence of a suitable orator, it is the silence that commemorates. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 25, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 24. When those who have become desensitized to mass death and to mass suffering respond to your fury and your sorrow by accusing you, my friend, of being too sensitive, you should take their accusation and wear it with pride.
Thousands of photographs of people and hearts on this wall. You will never be forgotten.
To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 24, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 23. The plague has carried much away from us, parents and lovers, colleagues and friends, relatives and children, the famous and the unknown. We shall not forget the date when it stole a life from us, though it is hard to know exactly what day it was when the plague carried away our hope. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts and photos on panel 23, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 22. There are no words, none that are sufficient. We draw on terms like calamity or tragedy, catastrophe or collapse. None are sufficient. All the words fail us, but this only happens after we have failed each other. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 22, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 21. To hold hope in one hand while holding despair in the other is to understand what it means to grieve. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 21, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 20. That which makes the tragedy unbearable is that the world carries on. That which makes the tragedy bearable is that the world carries on. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 20, you will never be forgotten.
Olivia.
We are at panel 19. That you are part of a we who have undermined your sacrifices does not mean that the privation you have endured was pointless. Take what solace you can in knowing that without your patience through these ordeals, this would be even worse. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 19, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 18. For the sake of decency, refrain from saying that life has returned to normal. While walking through a cemetery, fresh graves are still being dug. The mourners will hear you. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 18, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 17. It is impossible to find words that can suitably express enough sympathy for those in our midst who are grieving, for those who were ripped away from them by the plague. That we do not know the correct words does not free us from the responsibility to grieve with them. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 17. You will never be forgotten.
I've seen some people say about, are we showing the photographs? Yes, we will be. We didn't have time to do it before this, but we will be going back through and showing these hearts, showing the photos later.
We are at panel 16. As the scale of death becomes incomprehensible, we cease trying to comprehend it. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 16, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 15. If the dead were never counted, but only and always named, it would break us. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 15, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 14. There are days when I am overwhelmed by the need to mourn for the loss of a human. And there are days when I am overwhelmed by the need to mourn for the loss of their humanity. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 14, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 13. If you want to visit the site of a historic disaster, you need not fly out to the ruins of Pompeii. If you want to visit the site of a historic disaster, you need not fly out to the ruins of Pompeii or descend to the ocean floor. All you need to do is look around you. Please just take a moment and look around you. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 13, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 12. After a year, we should have learned how the cycle goes. We declare victory. We declare victory over the weakened plague, dancing and drinking in joy, only to miserably flee behind the safety of walls and masks when the plague attends our premature celebration. After a year, we should have learned. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 12, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 11. I know that there are emotions other than sorrow and rage, but no matter how deeply I search my memory, I cannot recall when I last felt something other than sorrow and rage. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 11, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 10. All of us were told that we must be willing to make sacrifices. Unfortunately, as it turns out, some of us are the sacrifice others are willing to make. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 10, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 9. You must not believe that our leaders have learned nothing from the pandemic, for it is quite clear they have learned that the best way to distract from the countless deaths is to dispute the count or to stop counting entirely. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 9, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 8. It was difficult enough to count the dead before our society decided that the dead do not count. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 8, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 7. There are days when you will grieve with sorrow. There are days when you will grieve with rage. And there are days when you will grieve because you have forgotten how it feels to not be grieving. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 7, you will never be forgotten.
Just to say, we will be doing another walk through the wall of photos later, so we are trying to show them as best we can, but obviously it may be that we can't show everyone on this path, but we will come back later and do a specific photo walk.
We are at panel 6. After 150,000 deaths were ignored, I assured myself that 175,000 deaths would not be. After 175,000 deaths were ignored, I assured myself that 200,000 deaths would not be. Sitting in the silence of 200,000 deaths, I began to suspect that no number can shock us to attention. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 6, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 5. It is too early, still too soon, to declare that we have learned nothing from this. But look around you. It is not too early and not still too soon to see and hear the many who are committed to learning nothing from this. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 5, you will never be forgotten. We're at panel 4. Some tragedies leave such a mark that their date becomes hallowed, synonymous with woe, set aside for remembrance. Those tragedies that leave ruinous scars day after day after day, that turn the calendar into a map of grief, remind us that mourning is not a day, but an obligation.
to the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 4. You will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 3. With so much going on, it is impossible to pause even a moment to acknowledge yesterday's dead. Besides, asking a society to pause for such a purpose would unhappily force it to admit that the pandemic continues. We will not pause, but as you are here, may these words remind you. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 3, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 2. Yes, many people died, and many are still dying. Yes, many suffered lasting damage, and many more face lasting damage. Yes, many are grieving, and many more will grieve. But forgive me my insensitivity. In the midst of this, I had forgotten that you were madly inconvenienced. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 2, you will never be forgotten.
We are at panel 1. That the smoke is clearing does not mean that your ordeal has concluded. You remain here still standing in your present spot amidst the ruins, wearing worn-out boots, with many miles left in your journey. Without the smoke, it will be easier to breathe, but we must keep moving. To the thousands of people represented by these hearts on panel 1, you will never be forgotten. We'll now move around the corner where we keep a tally of the COVID dead in the United Kingdom.
We are at our banner with the record of the UK deaths, and we haven't had time to update it today, but the number has increased. It's 238,888. So we'll change that number after we've cast the flowers into the river after 3 o'clock. Forgive yourselves for losing track of the daily deaths. That information is not as readily available or as frequently discussed as it once was. So forgive yourself for losing track of those horrid numbers. But do not be so quick to forgive your society for no longer tracking. Amelia. To every person represented by the numbers on this banner, you will never be forgotten. If you'd like to make your way back to the gazebo, we have some individual long stem carnations, and we've only got 200 of them. I don't know if we've got enough for everyone that's here today, but perhaps if you're a family group you could just take one between you. And after the clock has struck 3 o'clock, we invite you to cast the flowers into the river and watch them float away. Thank you for coming.
It's not too bad going from one to another.